Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Conservative Home Marquee. Thank you, those of you here in the room who've joined us in person. A big hello to Conservative Home readers and viewers watching around the country and around the world on YouTube. We're here on the second day of the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. We're approaching the point at which people start to ask you, what day is it in the conference cycle? So well done for sticking with the programme. We're here for this Conservative Home event in partnership with Nucleo on the topic innovation and investment. How can we use nuclear to underpin the UK's future energy security? Now, this is a debate, a topic I think we've all seen raised in a variety of circumstances in policy over the years. And frankly, the reputation in policy making for short-termism, for can-kicking, for the avoidance, I'm ashamed to say as a Conservative, often across political boundaries, the avoidance of short-term, difficult, detailed debates and decisions, and the preference for postponement of decisive policy measures on matters of national security, national infrastructure, and setting the fundamental conditions for a secure and sustainable model of growth. It applies across many different policy areas, but energy and energy security, I must say, is one of the most prominent and one of the most persistent. And unfortunately, I think we've all seen in the debates we see in the national press, in the crises we see in the economic sphere, in, of course, the outcome from the latest flare-up of Russia's war in Ukraine. We see now the fact that it's not possible to divorce this as a theoretical issue or simply a question of allocating resources in future to one place or another. This is something which comes directly home to British businesses, comes directly home to British consumers and families. And of course, thereby, it comes directly home to the most famous houses in the land, 10 and 11 Downing Street. So we're very fortunate today to be joined by Andrew Murdoch, the Project Director of UK Operations at Nucleo, and Virginia Crosby, Member of Parliament for Innis Mon, to share their views on exactly how nuclear can play a crucial part in that future of a more reliable, sustainable and secure energy supply for the United Kingdom. So I hope you'll join me in giving them a warm welcome. If I could go first to welcome Virginia. Each speaker will give some opening remarks, and we'll have a little bit of discussion compared by me, but I know ultimately a lot of you in the audience will have questions for them to elucidate this debate. So, Virginia, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for the kind invitation. And also thank you for all the work that Conhome does in terms of promoting the nuclear message. Aelod Senathol Anas Morn Dwi. I'm the Member of Parliament for Anas Morn, which I believe is the best constituency in the UK. Now, if I take you back almost 3 years, why did Anas Morn elect me? Why am I the first Conservative for 32 years? Why am I the first woman for 70 years? I'd hardly been to the island. I don't speak the language. I didn't speak the language, I speak it now. At the count, you're allowed 12 guests. I didn't know 12 people to invite. There isn't one Conservative councillor on the island. I'm the only MP out of 650 across the UK that hasn't got one councillor of their political party for support. So why did the island elect me? Well, because I was offering hope. I was offering jobs, and this is really what the island needs. It's had 2 decades of disinvestment under Welsh Labour, and it's got a Plaid Council and a Plaid MS. Now, Plaid are anti-nuclear, and I was promising to do everything I could to get a nuclear power station, which is Wilver, new nuclear at Wilver. Now, the original Wilver, my father actually worked there. My father's from Wales, and he had to leave Wales to find work, which is why all of his kids have got this dreadful English accent. But the real story is that I've come back to Wales to make sure other people don't actually have to leave Wales, and I'm doing everything I can to try and get this nuclear power station. I'm chair of the Nuclear Delivery Group, and I'm chair of the APPG on SMRs. Everything I do in Westminster is to try and actually get Wilver over the line, and indeed my nickname seems to be Atomic Kitten. I produced my annual report. This is my second annual report, and this has gone out to over 50,000 businesses and people across Anglesey. And as you can see, there's a picture of me standing outside the existing Wilver, and I'm really hoping that in a few years' time there'll be a photo of me actually standing outside the new nuclear power station, which would be right next door. So why is nuclear really important? And Mark has spoken very clearly about our energy security, particularly with the situation happening with Putin's illegal invasion of the Ukraine, and we've seen what's been happening with the Nord Stream situation as well. But there's not only our energy security. I think in terms of levelling up, these are really, really good jobs in nuclear. And we used to lead the way. In the 50s and 60s, we really led the way in nuclear. And I look at it like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle. We've got the fuel, we've got the decommissioning, we've got SMRs, we've got AMRs, we've got fusion, fission, large nuclear. We've really got all of those skills. We led the way in the 50s and 60s. We did not actually have a plan. And I'm really delighted that we've got the British Energy Security Strategy, and we should be hearing from GB Nuclear shortly. And I'm delighted that it's actually Simon Bowen, a Welshman, that will be heading up GB Nuclear. So what we need to see is a strategy. We need to go back to that fleet mentality. We've got all but one of our nuclear reactors coming offline over the next decade. 15% of our base load is from nuclear. If you compare that with France has got more than 80 nuclear power stations. 70% of their energy, their base energy, is from nuclear. Now, you might say to me, we love wind, we love solar, we love all these other green LNGs. And I say to you, fantastic. We absolutely need all of those. If we're going to really decarbonise the transport sector, and that is our holy grail, how are we going to decarbonise the transport sector? A lot of that is based on hydrogen. How are we going to get hydrogen? And that's pink hydrogen from nuclear. That's using the heat from nuclear power stations. So that's why we need all of these. But we also want to make sure that we have got those jobs here in the UK. This government is very committed to levelling up. And one of the ways we can actually do that is by having this fleet mentality. And if you look at the map of the UK where the nuclear power stations are, they're all on these coastal communities. And it's the coastal communities that really need support, and they need these excellent jobs. So we don't want to give that to the French. We actually want to keep those. We want to keep those for ourselves. So for all those reasons, I'm absolutely determined that we'll actually have a strategy, and it's in terms of skills, in terms of our young people. If you look at a small modular reactor or a large reactor is some 8,000, 9,000 construction jobs. And it means if you're working on one reactor, and then those people can then go to the second reactor and the third. And that will help us keep the cost down. Everyone talks about the cost per mega unit of Hinkley C being 92.50 a megawatt. Now, if you were offered that price now, you would actually bite someone's hand off. And if we look at the other sectors, if we look at the offshore wind sector, that sort of started at 140 megawatt an hour, and now it's down to between 40 and 50. So there's real benefits if we can actually have a strategy, both in terms of the costs coming down, but also in terms of our skills. It's actually investing in that. And it's a great opportunity for us to get back into a sector where we led in the 50s and 60s. I'm trying to get 2 large reactors at Wilver. We're trying to do a deal with Bechtel and Westinghouse. This is a really good opportunity for us post-Brexit to be tying up with one of the most important neighbours that we have, the US, in the world, and actually working with them very, very closely. But I'm also trying to get small modular reactors. Now, why are small modular reactors important? Because we want to not decarbonise, but we want to get this energy security for some of our heavy use industries. We're talking cement production, we're talking desalination, we're talking fertiliser, we're talking data collection. And with these small modular reactors, you can actually coexist these reactors next to the heavy energy use industry. And the original Wilver on Anglesey was set up because of Anglesey aluminium, and those two coexisted. So if we can coexist these small modular reactors next to heavy energy use, it's exactly where the energy needs to be going, and it won't have such a disruptive influence on the local community. And it really is the local community and that engagement that we need for nuclear investment. And one of the reasons why Wilver is such a great site in the UK is you actually have that support of the community. The community know what it means to have investment in the community. I stood on a manifesto to deliver nuclear, and people sort of say to me, how do I know the island wanted nuclear? Well, I say, well, do you know what? They actually elected me. So I think in terms of the UK government, we've had enormous support. They've really been getting all the pieces of the jigsaw in place. One of the issues has been finance. We've had the nuclear financing bill that went through. We've had the regulated asset base model, which they've used for the Tideway Tunnel. So we're really trying to get all those almost like, if you look at a Gantt chart, all those bottlenecks. The UK government is trying to is to try and put that support structure in place. The £120 million Future Nuclear Enabling Fund was actually launched on Anglesey by the Energy Secretary of State and by the Secretary of State for BEIS. And then one of the things I'm actually trying to get is a green taxonomy for nuclear. We've got green taxonomy for nuclear in Europe, we've got it in Canada, and it's a real opportunity for us to get that private investment and those pension fund money into the nuclear sector. We've got green taxonomy for solar, we've got green taxonomy for offshore wind, and I really want to make sure that we actually get that for nuclear. The Prime Minister is very committed to deregulation and actually making sure we can get as much private investment into the UK economy, and this is a really great opportunity for us to do that. So I'd like to end. My mission is to get nuclear not only on Anglesey, but to get it for the whole of the UK. This is our opportunity to level up, to deliver net zero, and also for our energy security, which is so important now.
Thank you very much. I must say, I'm not just saying this, in 17 long years of coming to Conservative Party conferences, I often meet MPs who say, I have a strategy, and you ask, and what they meant was, I have a hobby horse. But actually, to hear from an MP who does have a strategy, has a very clear idea of the things that need to take place in order to make something possible, that is how policy evidently does or does not change by someone driving things through. Now, our next speaker is from Nuclear, our partner for this event, but as you'll all have seen, ladies and gentlemen, from our big banner outside, also our partner who's kindly supported this very marquee being able to be here throughout the conference this week. So we're very fortunate to be working with Nuclear on this topic. Andrew Murdoch has over 20 years experience in the UK power industry, having started out, I think I might say, as a turbine metallurgist, which sounds an awful lot more complex than being a journalist who argues on the internet for a living. So huge amount of respect for that. He now leads the UK deployment of Nucleo's Generation 4 lead-cooled fast reactor technology, and is here to talk to us a little bit about that, and then, as discussed, to answer some of your questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me take the time just to tell you about Nucleo, what we are about, what we're here to do, and hopefully how we can help the UK. So Nucleo was founded just over 12 months ago, and we're a UK company. We aim to deploy safe, sustainable, affordable, low-carbon energy in the UK using our innovative Generation 4 fast reactor technology. It uses lead as a coolant, and it builds on over 30 years of European research focused on enhancing safety and reducing costs. Our 200 megawatt reactor is now just 6 meters by 6 meters diameter, so that means within this room we could fit probably 2 of them, and we could generate a power for around about 800,000 homes. Our UK reactors, and we intend to develop, build and operate a fleet of around 20 reactors across multiple sites at pace, around 4 gigawatts in total, enough power for around 8 million homes, 24/7. They'll be fueled on mixed oxide fuel made from recycled materials left over from the last generation of UK nuclear reactors. Some of us might call that nuclear waste. Material that's already in the UK and otherwise destined for deep geological disposal at significant cost. Nucleo is headquartered in London. We have an R&D centre in Turin in Italy. We're currently operating across the UK and France. And we're focused on building prototype reactors in both the UK and France within the next 7 to 10 years. Our ability to cleanly and sustainably generate power is compelling. In our first year of operation, we've already raised an initial 400 million of private investment, mainly from continental Europe, and as a result, we do not expect to need any taxpayer money to fund our projects. So we will invest billions of pounds in the UK to support the net zero and energy security ambitions. We will do so in a pro-consumer, pro-growth, responsible manner. And because of the way we are funded, we can do this really quickly. Our fleet of reactors, as part of a renewed drive for UK nuclear, will be a catalyst for growth and levelling up, as was already described. We will hire hundreds of people in the UK, and with many more employed across the supply chain, including in areas which need urgent economic support. Our project will develop advanced nuclear skills and knowledge and technology in the UK, helping the nation to become an international leader in new nuclear technology. And finally, in using nuclear materials, or what some might call waste, stockpiled in the UK to fuel our reactors, we not only increase energy independence, our project stands to save the taxpayer billions in long-term liabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As will be known to quite a few in our audience, Conservative Home's founder, Tim Montgomery, founded the site on a theme of what he called the politics of and, the idea that there were a huge number of false choices or in British politics, or indeed things that had once been choices but that had become false choices over time. And we'd got into the habit of talking about the idea that one could save taxpayers' money or have new energy infrastructure. One could have nuclear energy infrastructure or avoid the generation of what might be called nuclear waste. And I think that's one of the great opportunities of this debate, is the fact we're actually able to explore the politics of and. One can have these things and save taxpayers' money. One can have these things and find a direct solution rather than, say, deep geological disposal, or in another term, very, very deep under the ground burial of these materials. And that's one of the things which I think is quite interesting. In terms of, can you give the audience some insight into the way in which the technological position on this kind of generation has changed in recent years? What the actual tipping points have been, and what difference that should make for policymakers in how they might have thought about nuclear in the past, and how they can think about it with these technologies coming forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, the next generation of nuclear reactors really targets improvement across safety, sustainability, efficiency, and cost, right? They're looking at using different cooling mediums so that you can raise the temperatures in the reactors. And that allows you to think not only in terms of power to grid, but also, again, as Virginia's already talked about, various industrial uses for heat, which really helps to start thinking about decarbonising the different hard to decarbonise sections of industry. Again, when you're looking at Generation 4 technologies, a subset of those are fast reactors. And fast reactors have been around for many, many years. You know, the sodium reactors in France were built and operated safely for many years. We had our own fast reactors in the UK at Dounreay. So the technology has been there for a while, but it was never proven to be cost effective. So, you know, what nuclear has been focused on doing is simplifying the technology, reducing the size and scale of the technology, and therefore reducing the overall cost, which obviously then starts to make it economic and highly cost competitive compared to other technologies, not just economic. You know, so the fast reactor capability is what really allows you to burn MOX in our case, as we would call it, simply burn MOX, and that would allow us to, as I said, use these depleted uranium and plutonium stockpiles. You know, there's 140 to 150 tons of plutonium stored at Sellafield that can all be used to create this mixed oxide fuel that can be used to fuel our reactors.
Thank you. Virginia, as a campaigning MP, speaking, you know, knocking on the doors of regulators, ministers, spending departments, people doing strategic reviews, obviously some of the technological developments are one of the things that must have changed those conversations for you. But obviously, there's also the question of the global debate about energy security, and of course the comparative price. As you said, somebody would, you know, a government would bite people's hand off for some of the per megawatt hour prices we're now talking about. How has that changed for you in recent months and years in those conversations you're having, and what can be done now to capitalise on this moment of realisation to make sure it doesn't end up actually being too late for Britain to get in the right place on these policies?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some very good questions there. And I must say, over the last couple of weeks, we've had a new Prime Minister And you can really feel the support for nuclear in the chamber. When I'm standing up to talk about nuclear, everyone's expecting me to talk about nuclear, but you've actually got some MPs that I've never even heard talk about nuclear, and they're behind me, and I'm in PMQs, I'm turning around. And at PMQs, I couldn't count how many times the Prime Minister actually mentioned nuclear. We had the Secretary of State for Wales yesterday mentioned Wilver on the main platform there. The Prime Minister mentioned Wilver and nuclear at the Welsh event she was at yesterday evening. So you can really feel it. And I think what I've always sort of had an understanding that the electorate really got nuclear, and for that sort of that reason that we can't achieve net zero without it. But I think we've seen a real catch up over the last couple of years in terms of the parliamentarians. I'd love to say it's all down to me, but I don't think it is. I think that essentially we've got a cohort. Trudy Harrison's been absolutely fantastic. We've got Mark Jenkinson. There's some real advocates of nuclear in our seats. We can actually see how important it is to actually have that investment. So I think we've had a really good couple of years. And Mark, to answer your question on that, and then in terms of the new technologies coming through, we've seen the government. So initiatives like the Future Nuclear Enabling Fund, that enables us to actually have our own homegrown investment in the sector, coming up with some of these new technologies. And I think particularly when we're looking at some of the fuel that we're going to need if we're going to decarbonise the transport sector, we do need to be investing that end of the sector. So the new products, the new companies coming in. But equally, in terms of export, and I know nuclear, we need to take advantage of the companies like nuclear and Rolls-Royce so that other countries don't get access to some of our excellent developments. We need to make sure that we're actually benefiting it from ourselves. And then I think on a political angle, if you look at the influence and the reach that Putin has across the UK, across the world, in terms of other companies' energy securities, what we're seeing is a lot of these countries are working with Putin in terms of their energy security. And I think this is a really opportunity for us. We want to make sure that those countries are actually working with us and in terms of using our technology. I think being a Welsh MP, I'm just really excited about the potential of some of these small modular reactors. The Welsh steel sector has had a really tough time recently, and it'd be fantastic if we are actually producing these small modular reactors and the hardware here in Wales and certainly in the UK. But I think we've got some great talent, we've got some great initiatives, and I think we want to make sure we actually keep that for ourselves, but also benefit for that in terms of export on the global stage.
Andrew, can I put the same question to you in terms of how the change in world circumstances, obviously an extremely grim series of crises in a variety of ways, for which, in some ways, a lack of resilience in our system has been exposed. Is it already after a tipping point in crisis, or can this be deployed fast enough for us to start, to become much more resilient in the coming years?
I think the important thing from a nuclear industry point of view is that we remain focused on bringing forward the required capacity which has been identified in the British Energy Security Strategy and which has been clearly there in the net zero strategy as well, irrespective of what scenario of future energy scenario you look at. Of course, it takes time to deploy nuclear, and as we look at solving the current situation, stabilizing the economy, the energy price guarantee, which is obviously critical to dealing with the near-term issues. We also need to make sure we remain focused on the longer-term solutions, which actually require action now to ensure that we're focusing on the immediate steps that we need to take now to ensure that we continue to deliver that longer-term ambition.
And as somebody who's spent so much of their career in this field, kind of knocking on these doors and pushing forward these approaches to solving our energy problems. In a personal sense, I don't know if you've seen the clips of certain politicians from 2010, 2012, rejecting the idea of new nuclear in the UK because, it won't come on stream until 2022. Does it grind your gears a bit? Does that kind of element of working in something that takes time to do and then has a long-term impact, how does it feel to see perhaps policymakers dealing in short-termist priorities?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been we've definitely been challenged as an industry over the last 15, 20 years since the initial push on Hinkley Point, and at that sort of time I was also working to try and bring Wilver forward, and so there is obviously a personal sense of frustration that didn't deliver the fleet of nuclear power stations that could have been in place now, or certainly could have been close to coming online in the near future had we taken that route. But again, that's history. What we need to do is make sure we remain focused now on what do we need to do to bring forward a path, a sort of roadmap of projects that can ensure we deliver 24 gigawatts by 2050, and indeed not just 24 gigawatts, but probably we should shoot for a lot more. As Virginia already said, we can expect the prices of power generated from nuclear to continue to fall. We should remain really focused on delivering fleets, not individual reactors. And if we take that approach, we will want more nuclear, because we will see that nuclear, it can be delivered on time, we will see it can be delivered on budget, and we'll see the prices of it reduce significantly.
Do you think there's been a shift in understanding due to some of the weaknesses that have been exposed by recent crises in government and crucially in Whitehall and in regulators, of the need for proper long-termist decision-making and also setting the rules and the conditions under which nuclear and others can operate to allow that, to give the stability and certainty for decisions like this to be made?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is the acknowledgement from ministers, from the Secretary of State, that we need to have a strategy. And I think it's encouraging that we actually do have this strategy in place. I'm really, really excited about Great British Nuclear. We should be reporting to us soon and announcing that strategy. And actually this fleet mentality that Andrew was talking about, and we need to have a goal of producing at least one nuclear reactor each year over this decade in order to get that energy security. So I think what we need is a plan, and we need to have an ambitious plan. Personally, I think 24 gigawatt by 2050. I think we need to be even more ambitious than that. I think we need to be pushing even harder. I was very pleased to see that our plan for hydrogen was originally 5 gigawatt, and the government doubled that to 10. So if they're prepared to do that for hydrogen, I totally see that we could be increasing our target for nuclear.
And are there reasons to think that, God forbid, if there was a change of government, a change of party in government, that there's understanding on the other side of the House as well that this needs to have stability and it shouldn't be monkeyed with?
I would really hope so. I mean, clearly Labour has sort of said there is no economic case for new nuclear, and that is incredibly disappointing. In Wales, we've got the Labour government propped up by Plaid are anti-nuclear because they don't want to be part of any UK government infrastructure, which is really disappointing for the people across Wales, because it means they haven't got a champion in the Senedd. They haven't got Plaid championing them within Westminster, and this means that the opportunity of getting access to these thousands and thousands of high-skilled jobs in a growing, developing sector that will help contribute towards our net zero, which will help contribute towards our levelling up, and will help contribute towards our energy security. They're not actually pushing for. But as a party, I'm really proud how the Conservatives have really come together. The ministers have been absolutely fantastic, working with Treasury. As I said, I'm really hoping to get the green taxonomy announcement from Treasury soon, and hopefully we'll have some good news and we'll be powering ahead.
A question to each of you in terms of the kind of broad coalitions involved in some of this work. To what extent are you finding support, for example, given the job creation opportunities in, say, the trade union movement? And to what extent do you work kind of in step with other forms of generation, other parts of the industry? You were talking earlier about the relationship between baseload and renewable expansion, for example. Are there conversations that happen like that? Are people in touch with each other in a productive way, or do they feel like they're in competition?
I think one of the things you're talking about is the supply chain, and this is a huge sector that really has an incredibly supportive supply chain, but also in terms of the skills. So what we need to be essentially going into primary schools and actually saying to these young children, we've got some great jobs here we're going to, we're creating these great jobs as a UK government, but actually you need to do your part of the contract, which is, study the STEM subjects, go to secondary college, tertiary college. We really need our young people to step up, and it's been really encouraging to see some of the initiatives that we've got and some of the apprentices, the Horizon apprentices, for example. I can go into a room with the Horizon apprentices, and actually I don't actually have to say anything. These young people are real advocates of nuclear. And I went to Hinckley a few months ago, and it's so impressive. And I would say to you, if you ever get an opportunity to go there, do go and see. But a couple of apprentices came up to me, and one was from Anglesey and one was from Gwynedd, and one was a first language Welsh speaker. And these young people, they had to live and work 6 hours away from their home, away from their family, and away from their community. And it has huge ramifications for our Welsh culture and our Welsh language. So I think it's really important that we're working together for these young people. And what I would say to you is we've got the Young Nuclear Network. They've got a big, I'm the keynote speaker in Cardiff actually on the 9th of November. If there's anything you can do to help to make sure that these young people, in terms of them getting the message out, making sure they're fully funded, and they also have a platform to shout about this message, because we really do need to get the message out that there are some fantastic jobs coming through for these young people. We're doing our part for them. They need to do their part too.
Andrew, to that point on skills, we spoke to Ben Wallace this morning, and he was saying, well, he'd had the experience of working in defence to encourage the development and revamp of, say, new destroyers, only to find that the Navy didn't actually have crews to put, to put in them. When we're talking about policy making, kind of joined up policy making on these kind of lead times, obviously there's the strategic question and there's the regulatory question of what happens centrally to make this technology and deployment possible. What also needs to happen in other departments, education, skills, and so on, to make sure that the workforce is going to be there with the right skills so the UK gets the full benefit of these jobs?
I mean, it's absolutely true. For the UK to deliver this 24 gigawatt ambition and more, is really going to need a central control to be taken over the amount of resource necessary to do that, and to start investing now to ensure that we build it for the future. You already start to see, we as a business are looking to grow very rapidly. Nuclear currently is about 140 people. We're looking to grow to about 500 by the end of next year, and we will ultimately grow to hundreds within the UK. As you start to look for people, there's many other businesses in nuclear also looking for people, both in the supply chain and other technology companies, other developers. Sizewell are out building their team as well. So there's an awful lot of people trying to bring in nuclear skills at this point in time. So it won't be long until we stretch that, and we stretch it and it's too thin. So we need to take action to deal with that. As I said, as we grow exponentially, let's say, we need to be starting to put resources into schools, start changing the focus right from the beginning. My 11-year-old, when doing sort of early year 7 science, he's taught about nuclear, and all he's taught is it costs too much, it produces waste, and it's not safe. That's the narrative. That's the national curriculum on nuclear, and that's not really the rounded picture that we want people to see, and that helps them sort of make decisions to move into industry. Just one more point, actually collaborating and working together, both between sort of government, GBN, developers, other players within the industry currently in the UK. I mean, it's essential. We need to balance how we manage resource, competition, different projects moving forward at different levels, and that's something that clearly GBN is going to have to step up and play a key role in leading.
Can we touch on that question of, say, popular misconceptions about, say, safety, for example? What is being done? What more can be done in order to address popular concerns, mistaken memes, as they were, about the technology?
I mean, look, ultimately the UK is already the gold standard in nuclear regulation across, globally. And the nuclear industry generally has a sort of safety performance per kilowatt hour generated, which is up there with any other form of electricity generation. So the statistics and the data shows that nuclear is safe. So therefore it comes back to providing people with information and providing people with up-to-date facts to help people make their own decision. I mean, I think another key point here is the fact that the amount of support for nuclear and or no objection for nuclear is greatest of all around operating nuclear power stations and around the old decommissioned power stations, because you have generations of people who have lived and worked with operational nuclear power stations. They've seen the benefits that flow into communities and into businesses in the area, and therefore they accept it. And as I said, I was interviewing someone recently who said, my grandfather worked in the industry, my father worked in the industry, and I work in the industry. So, I think that's something else that somehow we need to try and share that enthusiasm about all of the benefits of nuclear.
So there might be a role for people who are already in those communities and around with that experience of the industry, actually to share their lived experience with other communities where new developments could take place.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the problem is, if I look at it from a nuclear perspective, we're looking to develop a fleet. We need to be able to get out there and start talking to the communities in the areas around where we will ultimately wish to build. And therefore, for us, siting is a key issue, because we want to go out and we want to talk to people. We want to build that support for the project. We want to be able to share the benefits that come from it.
Virginia, when you were talking before about Wilver, as you said, the idea of a new site next to the old site, that's often been the case in terms of recent policy making where developments have been able to happen to a limited degree and over a long period of time. When we're talking about, say, small modular development, obviously, and siting next to industries that are already in other parts of the country, that's going to involve a lot of new discussions with people in communities who are new to this debate. How does that fit in? Firstly, are you sharing your experience with some of your colleagues? Are they interested in the potential of this, where they don't yet have kind of nuclear industry heritage in their constituencies? And secondly, how does it fit in with some of the ideas the government are reportedly exploring in terms of, say, sharing community benefit for specific developments? You'll be aware of the debates going on around bays, for example. The idea that any form of new energy generation might come with a benefit in terms of reduced energy bills to people who live nearby, something I think has been done in France at various times. Is that something you'd support, and how does that kind of feed into what you're doing?
Well, in terms of the existing sites, of course, that's the best places that we can actually have new nuclear investment. And one of the things we've seen with Magnox, who are doing the decommissioning, is actually the stated ambition of actually having new nuclear on these sites. You've got the local workforce. And as Andrew said, you do have generations of families getting involved with these sites, and you've got a 10-year build, and then you're running these plants for decades, and then you're decommissioning. So it's a great opportunity for us to use those local skill sets, and those are the communities that are supportive of nuclear. And then in terms of the SMRs, I chair the APPG for SMRs, and it's quite interesting for me the number of MPs that come along to the meetings. Why? Because they want the jobs. They want the jobs in their constituency. And what we've seen with Rolls-Royce, one SMR is around £500 million and is around £2 billion, and you're looking at getting sort of a half a megawatt. And this is great for local communities in terms of that investment, in terms of the jobs in the area. And a lot of these constituencies, they're looking for levelling up, they're looking at investment, and this is a great way of them actually being able to do that and demonstrate to their constituents what these investments mean. And then your third point about community benefits, this is a question that I've asked in the Chamber quite a lot to Bays, and I've also asked Jacob Rees-Mogg about this. And I think it's fantastic that the government is actually saying, do you know what, if you're going to be hosting these, it's a huge amount of disruption and 10 years of trucks and noise, etc. So I think it's great that they're talking about the community should actually see a benefit from that, not only in terms of sort of Section 106 type investments, whether that's a new healthcare surgery or a new school or a football pitch, but also in terms of actually getting discounted energy bills. We are in a cost of living crisis, and one way we can actually support people for doing the right thing, for doing their contribution towards the UK. If we get Wilver up and running, it's enough energy to power the whole of Wales, plus a bit of extra. So I'd love my constituents to get a bit of reward for actually helping out England too.
And as we know, the phrase "an area the size of Wales" is the international SI measure for anywhere big in the media industry. So that's always good to hear. I'm very keen to bring in some questions from the audience. I should say at this point, this is Conservative Home. We do have some house rules. They include, first, after I ask you to give a question, please say who you are and where you're from, be it a local association or if you're here in a professional capacity. Secondly, of course, please wait for the microphone to reach you. And thirdly, please do make sure that your question is actually a question. If it turns out to be a speech, a peroration, best man's or father of the bride speech, I will boo you from the chair until you sit down. I'm sure the rest of the audience will be grateful that we actually have a discussion to continue what our panelists have already shared with us. So who would like to go first? We'll take the gentleman here.
Thank you. Graham Jones, Southport Conservatives. I've listened with so much enthusiasm to what the panel has been telling us today. I've got two questions. One is, what is the lead time for both Wilfer and the more portable units, shall I say, in getting these rolled out, given what we're going through at the moment? And secondly, what would Sir Ed Davey say about all this if he were to get into coalition, God forbid, with the Labour Party?
Over to you first.
Okay, I mean, our lead time, we would expect something like 7 or 8 years from the point at which we start to identify a site and move forward to develop our reactors. So our first of a kind in the UK should be operational within 7 to 10 years. The time to roll out subsequent units would be significantly less because we'd have gone through and identified where we're going to build them and have everything ready to go and deploy a fleet. There are many hurdles for nuclear projects, many regulations which need to be gone through, many ticks in a box that need to be secured before one can say one has the green light.
Virginia, there's a more political question in there. If you use the politician on the panel, I'll pass over to you.
Exactly. I mean, I'm delighted that Wilfer was mentioned in the British Energy Security Strategy, absolutely delighted. And the recent news regarding Sizewell C, in terms of the government moving ahead with Sizewell C, really does put the spotlight on Wilfer. So we are the next site to go. So to answer your question, a lot does need to happen. I think the support is there from the UK government. They're definitely making the right noises. Historically, it fell down on the financing, so I'm pleased to see the government has put this, the nuclear finance bill in place, the RAB, the regulated asset-based model in place to actually try and get investment in the sector. If we can get green taxonomy again, it really, for these large capex infrastructure projects, it is really about getting the finance in place. And then we need to do a DCO, development consent order. These are essentially planning permission for these sort of large capex projects. We need to start that. A lot of that has been done already by Hitachi because we've sort of been here before, and we'll be able to use a lot of that. So in terms of actually getting it up and running, I think Wilfer's got a much better chance than anywhere else, just because so much work has been done already.
And Sir Ed Davey, the ghost of the feast.
Yeah.
Or an elephant in the room, whichever now.
Yeah, I think we're in a really different space regarding nuclear now. I think we really have seen a huge move forward in the last couple of years. There is so much support on both sides of the chamber, and whenever I do some speeches, and a lot of them are not all sort of warm and friendly like here, I do actually say to a lot of the electorate to actually write to their MPs and actually say that they actually do want to have nuclear in their constituency and they want to have a piece of this action. If you look at what's happening in France, they've announced another 6 nuclear reactors. 70% of their base load is from nuclear, and a lot of these constituents, doesn't matter what party they are, they want to have access to those jobs. So it's up to them to put pressure on their members of parliament.
May I ask you both a supplementary question on that question of timing? Are there regulatory changes that could happen within the UK system which would improve and shorten that timescale? We spoke to Jacob Rees-Mogg on this very stage yesterday, and he was talking about the government's view of an enterprise nation learning the regulatory lessons around the application of the precautionary principle to public policy and regulation following the pandemic. When he said, actually, we found out with the MHRA, if you have a regulator which takes the view of managing risk in order to deliver new technologies to change or save people's lives or deliver national objectives, that's very different to a regulator or a regulatory environment that says, please don't, the safest thing to do is to sit still. Now we're in an environment when we can see that actually sitting still and not deciding is actually incredibly risky in itself. What regulatory changes, either in terms of the rules on the page or the guiding philosophies of regulators would help this along the way?
One of the issues with nuclear historically has been that risk. That risk is historically been taken by the UK government, and it's been a developer that's actually developed the project. And so risk comes at a cost. It comes at an enormous cost. And if you look at the price per megawatt unit, a lot of that relates to that risk. So what we've seen from UK government is how can they use their, essentially the taxpayers' balance sheet, the government's balance sheet, to actually mitigate that risk. And I think that's why the regulated asset-based model is so good at actually bringing that money in. So we have seen some very proactive moves by the UK government to try and eliminate that risk. But these developers, what they need to hear from the UK government, that they have a strategy, that they have support. They're putting a lot of investment into this sector, and the UK government does need to do its part. So I'm really pleased that all of the announcements that have been coming through over the last 2 years, I mean, they've been thick and fast, starting with the 10-point plan from Industrial Revolution. We've had the energy white paper. We have had, as I mentioned, the financing bill. So we're really getting all of our ducks in a row, and I think that's a really positive message to the industry and to suppliers and those investing in the sector, that this UK government is committed, and it's committed to UK nuclear.
Andrew, somebody who's working on these kind of projects, but also is a technologist in the field, what's your view?
Yeah, so I think one of the key issues is and Virginia mentioned RAB financing as coming forward as providing a significant solution to the financing problem. The gap that RAB financing leaves is that effectively to take a project from the point of the beginning through to the point at which you can attract or sign up to a RAB funding is a huge amount of money. For gigawatt projects, it's vast. But actually for SMRs and advanced reactors like ours, it is still very large in proportion to the output of the plant. As Virginia said, that responsibility currently always falls to developers. And perhaps Great British Nuclear will come forward as a way of helping suppliers or developers get through that period. To the gentleman's question there around green lights, you know, it's certainly internally within my organisation, I've got a green light. It's not a question of my investors' appetite to move forward. It's a question of having tick boxes to allow me to move forward, and therefore, you know, there's a huge amount of complexity around those tick boxes. Regulation has often been accused as a reason that slows projects down. Actually, there's lots of experience in working with existing regulation, and so obviously streamlining regulation, which is of course absolutely welcomed, and we're grateful the Conservatives are looking at moving that forward. It comes with a risk that we then have new regulation, which people have to go through and find the problems with. So that, you know, again, that's another challenge for GBN, is how do we make sure we roll out regulation in a way that works and doesn't, you know, get in the way. For me, as I said, this massive amount of work before a project can pass the final hurdle, which is required before it is free to manage its own destiny. You know, what really would help projects is much earlier clarity from government about the fact it is needed, the project is needed, the fact that there are clear hurdles, that if the project achieves, it's there, rather than sort of having unclear goalposts. And you know, that early support, I think, is pretty vital. And if, you know, the government can help in that respect, it will really help developers come into the space and take the risk themselves without having to be backstopped by Treasury.
Certainly, thank you. Now, I saw there was another question in the room. Yes, the gentleman here.
Louis Plowden-Wardlaw, Terrestrial Energy, which is another advanced modular reactor / small modular reactor developer. I find myself in the happy position of being able to adopt more or less everything that the panel has said and agreeing with it. But I'm mindful also that back in 2002 or 2000, somewhere around then, there were similar targets to build 15 gigawatts electrical a reactor a year, and Margaret Beckett scotched that. Now, we're in a very happy moment, particularly informed by high gas prices, in terms of the acceptability of nuclear now not being a dirty word. And it's been great in many ways, the policy initiatives that have been coming out of the government in this sector. But there are two elements. One is policy persistence. So it's making sure that the same doesn't happen again. There are 2 years left of this government. It would be extremely valuable if this target of 24 gigawatts electrical, perhaps why not 20 gigawatts heat, be locked in as targets in some way. So policy persistence. And the other part is policy clarity. So the RAB is a very good, on the face of it, mechanism. However, it offers absolutely no clarity on what activities it actually covers, how the Secretary of State's discretion will be exercised to set prices, and if you actually want to incent private capital to take decisions to invest, then something like the sort of the acknowledgement of the learning curves that will be needed to get fleet deployment and down the learning curves that were successfully used to deploy offshore wind could be extremely helpful, because at the moment people are very mindful of Hitachi's experience and will not want to blow £2 billion and then essentially be left standing at the altar. So you asked me to make these things a question
yes.
rather than a peroration, and I can see that I'm in danger of falling into that trap. So I would ask the panel to comment on what measures can be taken to offer that policy persistence and the policy clarity to actually attract the capital that is very interested in the opportunity, but when it comes down to it, you can't be confident.
How to provide the certainty, and I think implicit to your question, for example, is this a moment when the government should return to its habit or the habit of its predecessors in legislating a target? Is that something you'd like to, would it make a difference?
Well, first, Louis, I disagree with you saying we've only got 2 more years. I think I've got to say that. But what I would say is great British nuclear. Great British nuclear. I mean, it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. And I think if you look at what we did with the ventilator challenge, we led the way with that, and what we've done with vaccines. And actually, when we all work together as a team, and I'm sure you know lots of the characters, lots of the players in Great British Nuclear, we really have got fantastic people there. And actually, I think that's a game changer. Never before we've had in the 50s and 60s, decades ago. And I think that is incredibly exciting. And I just would love. I mean, I personally would shout from the rooftops about that, because I think what we've missed from a strategy. We've missed actually just saying, do you know what, we're going to be rolling 1 out a year, and actually telling people, telling the suppliers, telling the investors, telling the supply chain, this is actually what we're doing, so people can buy into that strategy. And most importantly, it's going to put the UK government on notice, because this is the UK government strategy. And if they want to be taken seriously, if they want to get re-elected, they're going to have to deliver it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with many of Louis' points. For me, I've got continuity and clarity written down on my piece of paper here. It's similar sort of language to yourself. I think long-term policy is absolutely essential, and the more we can enshrine that in stone, the better. And I've already said we need clarity of hurdles. We need to know how high they are. We need to know where they are, and we need to know that if we meet them, then we pass the gate. I think we need clarity in the role of GBN, and we're looking forward to that coming out. I think it'll be really important for us to understand, what their role is for privately funded organisations, and how we make that work, combined with the other potential role of GBN in bringing forward projects which perhaps don't have the full value chain in place. I think there's I've always visualized the role, the gap that is necessary to be filled as being, if you look at the pipeline of every project that might come forward, when will it come forward? What's its scale? Who's developing it? What technology are they using? Where is it looking to be developed? What are the main milestones that project achieves? If anything, and how does that fit with 24 or 28 or 48 or whatever the figure is? And someone needs to monitor and make sure those projects move forward. And if there's a problem with a project, it needs an intervention. It needs help, whatever that help is. And if a project isn't moving forward, then it's not meeting its hurdles. And so, you know, that for me is my view of what is needed, and therefore what GBN needs to pick up on and deliver.
And I think on that note, if you allow me to sum up, I think I said at the outset that I think what we're seeing is, unfortunately, the United Kingdom has got itself to a position in which, wittingly or unwittingly, politicians, households, businesses, and the national environment are currently reaping the whirlwind, not just of external crises of others making, but actually of a lack of resilience baked into our system by can-kicking, short-termism, sadly, sometimes the fact it's easier to promise that down the line the major issues will be resolved than it is to actually get on and resolve them, part of all government. So, but having painted that picture at the outset, I'm quite encouraged, frankly, for the discussion we'll be able to have with the panel and with the audience this afternoon about the way in which not just that times have changed in order to really focus people's minds in government, Whitehall on this, but actually that cometh the hour, cometh the technological opportunity to actually deliver this. You said earlier, Andrew, when I said, does it frustrate you to hear people 12 years ago say, oh, let's not do new nuclear, it'll only come online in 12 years' time. You said, that's history. And I think we should take the inspiration from that as our finishing note. Actually, there is the opportunity to make a difference on this front. There's certainly the need to do it. And I think viewing this not in isolation as simply an energy question or simply a nuclear energy question, but in terms of innovation, investment, skills, coastal communities and levelling up, gives an awful lot of opportunity for your colleagues, some of whom are coming to this new converts and disciples to the cause, hopefully gives some opportunity with ministers listening to make this happen. So it falls to me to say thank you very much to our audience here in the room at the Conservative Home Marquee in Birmingham and at home watching on YouTube. Thank you very much to Nucleo for making this event possible as our partner, and I hope you'll join me, all of you, in thanking Virginia Crosby and Andrew Murdoch, our speakers.
Thank you very much.